Hi students, welcome to lesson number 37, Theories of Social Change Part B. The problem of explaining change was central to 19th century sociology. This concern was due to awareness of the radical social effects of industrialization in European societies and an appreciation of the fundamental gap between European industrial societies and so-called primitive societies. Thus, change was interpreted as evolution. It is a universal movement from an indefinite unstable homogeneity to a definite stable heterogeneity. Later, change was understood as progress. Progress is any positive change or voluntary adaptation that makes it easier to live. Lastly, change is also seen as development, which means a desirable form of social change in which the hidden potential is utilized. However, all these terms fell short of defining change as they were subjective and value loaded. Today, a consensual and an objective definition of social change is the difference between the current and previous condition of any selected aspect of social organization or structure. This implies that changes can be structural in the form of stable structural elements or cultural, that is, changes in values, folkways, mores, or as 𝗧𝗪𝗺 noted, structural change. The objectives of this lesson are: elaborate conflict theory of social change and describe modernization theory of social change. Let us now discuss conflict theories of social change. Conflict theory emphasizes the role of coercion and power in producing social order. This perspective is derived from the works of Karl Marx, who saw society as fragmented into groups that compete for social and economic resources. Social order is maintained by domination with power in the hands of those with the greatest political, economic and social resources. When consensus exists, it is attributable to people being united around common interests, often in opposition to other groups. According to conflict theory, inequality exists because those in control of a disproportionate share of society's resources actively defend their advantages. The masses are not bound to society by their shared values, but by coercion at the hands of those in power. This perspective emphasizes social control, not consensus and conformity. Groups and individuals advance their own interests, struggling over control of societal resources. Those with the most resources exercise power over others, with inequality resulting in power struggles. Whereas the equilibrium theories emphasize the stabilizing processes at work in social systems, the conflict theories highlight the forces producing instability, struggle and social disorganization. According to Ralph Dahrendorf, the conflict theories assume that every society is subjected at every moment to change. Hence, social change is ubiquitous. Every society experiences at every moment social conflict. Hence, social conflict is also ubiquitous. Every element in society contributes to change. Every society rests on the constraint of some of its members by others. His theory is based exclusively on relations of authority. The distribution of authority leads to the formation of two conflict groups corresponding to two positions of control and subjection, those who give orders and those who take orders. Thus, the two classes, the rulers and the ruled, lead to inherent possibilities of conflict arising out of incompatible interests. The most famous and influential of the conflict theories is the one put forward by Karl Marx, who along with Engels wrote in Communist Manifesto that all history is the history of class conflict. Individuals and groups with opposing interests are bound to be at conflict. Since the two major social classes, the rich and poor, or capitalist and proletariat, have mutually hostile interests, they are at conflict. History is the story of conflict between the exploiter and the exploited. This conflict repeats until capitalism is overthrown by the workers and a socialist state is created. Marx and other conflict theories deem society as basically dynamic and not static. They consider conflict as a normal process. They also believe that the existing conditions in any society contain the seeds of future social changes. Like Karl Marx, 𝗳𝗏 too stressed the importance of conflict in social change. According to him, conflict is a permanent feature of society and not just a temporary event. It is a process that binds people together in interaction. Further, conflict encourages people of similar interests to unite together to achieve their objectives. Continuous conflict in this way keeps society dynamic and ever changing. According to the conflict perspective, society is made up of individuals competing for limited resources like money, leisure, sexual partners, etc. Competition over scarce resources is at the heart of all social relationships. Competition rather than consensus is the characteristic of human relationships. Broader social structures and organizations, that is religions, government, etc., reflect the competition for the resources and the inherent inequality competition entails. Some people and organizations have more resources, that is more power and influence, and use those resources to maintain their position of power in society. 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧 𝗚 is known as the founder of modern conflict theory. In his work, he believes social structures are created because of conflict between differing interests. People are then impacted by the creation of social structures, and the usual result is a differential of power between the elite and the others. While functionalism emphasizes stability, conflict theory emphasizes change. According to the conflict perspective, society is constantly in conflict over resources, and that conflict drives social change. In the conflict perspective, change comes about through conflict between competing interests, not consensus or adaptation. Conflict theory therefore gives sociologists a framework for explaining social change, thereby addressing one of the problems with the functionalist perspective. Let us now discuss modernization theories of social change. Modernization theory emerged in 1950s as an explanation of how the industrial societies of North America and Western Europe developed. The theory argues that societies develop in fairly predictable stages through which they became increasingly complex. Modernization theory is a theory used to explain the process of modernization within societies. The theory looks at the internal factors of a country while assuming that with assistance, traditional countries can be brought to the development in the same manner more developed countries have. Modernization theory attempts to identify the social variables which contribute to social progress and development of societies and seeks to explain the process of social evolution. Modernization theory is subject to criticism originating among socialist and free market ideologies, world systems theorists, globalization theory and dependency theory among others. Modernization theory not only stresses the process of change, but also the responses to that change. It also looks at internal dynamics while referring to social and cultural structures and the adaptation of new technologies. The idea of modernization is relatively new. Its basic principles can be derived from the idea of progress, which emerged in 18th century age of enlightenment with the idea that people themselves could develop and change their society. French philosopher Marquis de Condorcet was involved in the origins of the theory with the concept that technological advancements and economic changes can enable changes in moral and cultural values. Condorcet was the first to make the economic social development connection and that there can be continuous progress and improvement in human affairs. He encouraged technological processes to help give people further control over their environments, arguing that technological progress would eventually spur social progress. Let us discuss significant contributors to modernization theory. Walt Whitman Rostow, American economist and political theorist, in his The Stages of Economic Growth, a non-communist manifesto published in 1960, concentrates on the economic system side of modernization. He focuses on factors needed for a country to reach towards the path of modernization in his Rostovian takeoff model. David Apter, American political scientist and sociologist, concentrated on the political system and history of democracy, researching the connection between democracy, good governance, efficiency and modernization. Seymour Martin Lipset, American sociologist, in Some Social Requisites of Democracy, published in 1959, argued that economic development sets off a series of profound social changes that together tend to produce democracy. David McClelland, the American psychologist, in Achieving Society, published in 1967, approached this subject from psychological perspective with his motivations theory, arguing that modernization cannot happen until a given society values innovation, striving for improvement and entrepreneurship. Alex Ingalls, the American sociologist, in his popular book Becoming Modern, published in 1974, similarly creates a model of modern personality which needs to be independent, active, interested in cultural matters, open for new experiences, rational and being able to create long-term plans for the future. Edward Said's Orientalism interprets modernization from the point of view of societies that are quickly and radically transformed. Under the heading of modernization theory, many different approaches to the phenomenon of modernization can be subsumed. Authors from economics, sociology, anthropology and political science have contributed to modernization theory. Let us now discuss Walt Whitman Rostow and the stages of economic growth theory. Prior to Rostow, approaches to development had been based on the assumption that modernization was characterized by the Western world, wealthier, more powerful countries at that time, which were able to advance from the initial stages of underdevelopment. Accordingly, other countries should model themselves after the West, aspiring to a modern state of capitalism and a liberal democracy. It is perhaps because of the simplicity of the approach that Rostow's work has become typical for modernization theory. Rostow presented 5 steps through which all countries must pass to become developed. The first is traditional society, second is preconditions to take off, the third is take off, the fourth is drive to maturity, and fifth is age of high mass consumption. The model asserted that all countries exist somewhere on this linear spectrum and the climb upward through each stage in the development process. Let us now discuss these stages in brief. The traditional society. This stage is characterized by a subsistent agricultural based economy with intensive labor and low levels of trading and a population that does not have a scientific perspective on the world and technology. The traditional stage is characterized by a society in which the attainable output per capita is limited, partly because production is predominantly agricultural. The second stage is preconditions to take off. Here, a society begins to develop manufacturing and a more national or international as opposed to regional outlook. The preconditions for takeoff develops under the influence of scientific progress. The scientific innovations are applied in, for instance, agriculture, thereby increasing the funds available for investment. The third stage is that of takeoff. Rostow describes this stage as a short period of intensive growth in which industrialization begins to occur and workers and institutions become concentrated around a new industry. The actual takeoff stage is usually triggered off by a particular stimulus, often from outside the national society. The prior development of the society and its economy leads to self-sustained growth. The investment levels are higher than before, especially in transport, which has a stimulating effect on the whole economy, and important manufacturing sectors experience high rates of growth. For this to happen, entrepreneurial elite must have developed. The next stage is that of drive to maturity. This stage takes place over a long period of time as standards of living rise, use of technology increases, and the national economy grows and diversifies. The drive to maturity is characterized by the growth of new economic sectors superseding the leading sectors of takeoff stage. In Europe, new activity was mainly concentrated in heavy industry, which took place of agriculture as an important part of the economy. The last stage is the age of high mass consumption. At the time of writing, this theory, Rostow believed that Western countries, most notably the United States, occupied this last developed stage. Here, a country's economy flourishes in a capitalist system characterized by mass production and consumerism. In the age of high mass consumption, consumption instead of production occupies a central place in society. Rostow sees three possible developments in this phase. Firstly, the pursuit of power in the form of investment in military strength. Secondly, the emphasis on the welfare state, and thirdly, expansion of consumption. Rostow's stages of growth model is one of the most influential development theories of social change in 20th century. As a staff member in President John F. Kennedy's administration, Rostow promoted his development model as part of US foreign policy. Rostow's model illustrates a desire not only to assist lower income countries in the development process, but also to assert the United States' influence over that of communist Russia. According to Rostow, economic modernization is complemented by political development, which is to be perceived as the elaboration of new and more complex forms of politics and government as societies restructure themselves. The process of economic growth places several issues on the political agenda, most notably welfare, constitutional and security issues. Bert F. Hurslitz is considered to be one of the most important scholars who has written about the sociological aspects of modernization. His contribution to modernization theory started as a critique of dominant theories of economic growth. Since economic development in Hurlitz's view is associated with a more complex division of labor, more developed societies are characterized by an increased specificity of productive tasks. With respect to the development of presently underdeveloped countries, Hurslitz stresses that very needs of economic advancement must bring about a gradual replacement of ascription as a standard by achievement, and associated with this a replacement of functional diffuseness by functional specificity and particularism by universalism. Daniel Lerner, American scholar, has also stressed the sociological and psychological components of modernization. Lerner defines modernity as primarily a state of mind, expectation of progress, propensity to growth, readiness to adapt oneself to change. Rationality is a key concept in Lerner's theory of modernization. During the process of modernization, people learn to adapt themselves to new demands imposed on them by society and their natural environment. Modern society, in Lerner's view, is also a participant society in which people want to take part in decision making, they keep in touch with and have opinions on public matters. Mass media, therefore, is an indispensable element of modernity. Modernization is perceived as the process by which participant societies develop. The evolution of such societies involves at least three stages, which have been summed up by Lerner as urbanization, literacy and mass communication. This is seen as a general sequence of stages. The model of modernization follows an autonomous historical logic. Each phase tends to generate the next phase by some mechanism which operates independently of cultural or doctrinal variations. Many different theories were propounded to define and explain social change. Early sociologists viewed the culture of primitive people as completely static, but this was abandoned with the appearance of scientific studies of pre-literate cultures. Anthropologists now agree that primitive cultures have undergone changes, although at such a slow pace. Irrespective of any causal factor of social change, the permanence of social change as process cannot be denied. Conflict theory emphasizes the role of coercion and power in producing social order. This perspective is derived from the works of Karl Marx, who saw society as fragmented into groups that compete for social and economic resources. Modernization theory attempts to identify the social variables which contribute to social progress and development of societies and seeks to explain the process of social evolution. Rostow penned his classic stages of economic growth theory in 1960, which presented 5 steps through which all countries must pass to become developed. They are the traditional society, second one is the preconditions to take off, the third one is take off, the fourth one is drive to maturity, and the last is age of high mass consumption. The model asserted that all countries exist somewhere on this linear spectrum and climb upward through each stage in the development process.